I've got something for you today that I think you're going to be as equally passionate about as I am. I want to show you how to make some really spacious drums that are still full of character inside your sleepy, lo-fi or ambient tracks. Let's dive into it. So I had the pleasure of sitting down with one of my students recently. By the way, you can book one-to-one sessions over at the Patreon, and they brought their track to the session. This is the artist Soiree, by the way. You can find their stuff linked in the description on Spotify, and I'm sure this track will be out in no time as well. It didn't yet have any drums. It sounded like this. Absolutely gorgeous, right? There wasn't yet any drums or percussion, but this particular artist wanted to add it. And when I said, what have you got in terms of a placeholder or a reference, the reference they had wasn't a million miles away from this. And I said, buddy, this pattern here, is like a slow Aerosmith's Walk This Way. Kick, snare, kick, 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 snare. And it doesn't do any favors to the gorgeous pads and things that were going on. I said, leave it with me. I want to make an episode about this. So in today's episode, I want to show you how to make something like this. First of all, you want to listen to your track and hear where the accents are. I can hear an accent on bar 9, that big block chord there, and then an accent on bar 13. But then we have this space at the end of each of the 4 bars. And at that point, you need to decide, is that where I'm going to leave the space for the listener so they have a break? Or am I going to fill up my busy percussion in that area because we do have the space to play with? First thing that I would do is map out your kicks, and for this example, I would have them in the first bar, and that's it. Lots of space to play with here. Just a little ghost note before the same pattern once again. Not doing too much with these kicks. They're the lovely samples that come from my buddy Docado. We have a new song out, by the way, and you can find that in the description. All I've done is roll off some really low frequencies. I'm also making sure that in my pad group, I've got a compressor which is linked to that kick as well. That's going to add some movement to your pads. So now there's kind of a bouncy feel that wasn't there originally. The next thing is to add the snares. So I've added the snares on the 2nd bar and the 4th bar. They're really spacious and there's a key difference. On the 4th bar, the 2nd round of snares, we're going to have a big luscious reverb. This is being sent to our return at the bottom, which just has Valhalla Vintage Verb and an EQ8 on it. Something that I did after I had that reverb there is just record that audio so I can then reverse it. And this is the reverse reverb here. And you can hear there's been a little bit of reverb sent to that signal as well, using the align delay so it's a little bit wider than my snares. Now, my snare sounds in particular have been warped, set to beats, transients. We're preserving the transients, the loop forward mode, and then bringing that envelope all the way back to 0. This makes our snare ring out just a little bit less. So it's much more subtle now. And the same goes for our 2nd sound, which is just a rim shot. Now remember that reverse snare is only occurring before the downbeat of that 4th bar as well. We don't have it on the 1st bar. You don't want it to become too monotonous. So this is everything that we've got so far. Not busy at all, lots of space to play with. Now, one of the things that I did do to make this job a little bit easier as we're moving forward is change the BPM from 67 to 134 BPM. So I've doubled the tempo. The reason that I've done that is when I'm listening to the click, it gives me more ideas of how to play with my track rhythmically. I can hear the subdivisions in this track now, rather than just listening to the click at 67 BPM and only hearing those initial downbeats. You can have a few more ideas for polyrhythms and things like that. To help that skippy kick drum pattern, I've just got two hi-hats that play outside of the kick drum here and a little bit ahead of the bar line. Now you can see a little bit of movement here. This is really easy to do. I felt like the second hi-hat was just a little bit too bright when it plays with the other noise that you'll hear in just a second. So a really easy thing to do is add the LFO modulation device. You can find this in audio effects and then modulators. I'm setting the frequency to 80% and 100 and the rate to 2. So over 2 bars, it's going to be like clockwork. It's going to play the higher frequency. And then on this second hi-hat, it's going to play the lower frequency. Every single time. Of course, I could automate these parameters, but the LFO modulation device is really low on CPU and just saves me drawing in a bunch of red lines. This is where I get really excited. Listen to this hi-hat pattern. It's super like ASMR-y and just really tickles the listener's ears. Well, it originally sounded like this, comes from my buddy, Dokado. So we've gone from something really loud like this to something like this. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing that you're going to want to do is double click on that pattern and then assign a groove. Yes, you can actually assign templates from the groove pool, which you'll find over here in grooves, to any audio. And it's just going to start playing that audio a little bit differently. So I assigned the Jazz 5/4 Swing Cool Apes preset to this audio and then brought those transients all the way down, preserving the beats here. Even at 100, it sounds really cool and unique. But bringing it right down makes it all kind of crackly and very ASMR-like. So how do I get that pitch sound? Well, the first thing that I'm going to do is add the shifter, and the shifter is going to be working throughout. This is set to frequency and course is the only thing that I'm automating. I do a couple more things, but I want to interrupt this video real quick to tell you about today's sponsor, which is of course DistroKid. Now I love using DistroKid because they help me get my music on over 200 platforms. One of the really beneficial things of DistroKid's site is the Enhance Your Music tab. From here you have the Spotify Canvas generator, which I've spoken about before, but you can also add lyrics, credits, and use the AI bot Dave that helps you tell you a little bit more about your track so you can get that help pitching it to playlist curators. I'm definitely going to be using lyrics in the future when I work with more vocalists. If you want to join me on the platform and get 7% off your first year, then just use the link in the description below. Now let's talk about this cool stuff that's also going on with the kind of hi-hat percussion line. I'm using a line delay to make sure that some of the notes are really wide, and you can see that I'm automating this. So anything that's really pitched up, I'm going to automate those notes to be much wider and have some movement. When it gets to a lower frequency, I'm going to kind of mono out that frequency. The glue compressor is just stopping any of those really, really loud notes from being too peaky. And then I'm also automating the gain from the utility here so that I can kind of turn things up or turn things down when I need to. Some of these notes here are really quiet, and I've also chopped up this kind of triplet fill here. So I wanted that to get louder. You'll notice that I kind of have an on-beat, off-beat pattern to my hi-hats or my percussion line. It kind of tallies up with the kick drum pattern, then has some space, and then again tallies up leading into the snares later on. It's not going to be like our Walk This Way pattern that we had in the reference. Chak, 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 all the way through the track. We don't want that. We want it to keep it very, very sparse in our track. Really, this is probably already enough. It's sounding quite busy, but we want to add just some other little flavors in here. But this is what we've got so far. So from here, I tried to imagine a drummer and how a drummer would add little pieces of his character in amongst the groove. So I'm using the ride cymbal to achieve that, and it only plays in 2 places: at the end of the 3rd bar, and then as a straight ride playing each downbeat in the 7th and 8th bar. I haven't added anything or even EQ'd it because it sounds really nice, and that just plays around my other percussion. And then the only 2 things that I have after this are some glass Foley sounds. And these are just panned. I grabbed these from Splice. Finally, I got these really loud toms from Splice. And I just wanted to use that in the drum groove. So we've got these toms, I've chopped them up. I've added the color limiter, which you probably saw earlier in the week on a short episode, and then the EQ8. So we've got a little bit of saturation there, and we're just rolling off the lows. I've also double clicked on these clips, come down to the left, and then just brought those transients down. So we've got less overtones from these drums as well. With our percussion, that's going to add just a little bit more imagery to our track. So I was really happy with this. What I wanted to do is just get rid of that kind of annoying reference symbol that we had from the beginning of the track and add something that was a little bit more tasteful. Again, I've included this in my moods video in how you can create characters and swells for your track, as well as get over the fear of the blank canvas. So what we want to do is just add the delay, large hall, vocoder, and the EQ8 here. And you can see that I'm automating the frequency, the dry wet of the vocoder, the dry wet of the reverb, and the dry wet of the delay here, as well as messing with the gain, just so it fades in a little bit at the beginning to get this effect. That is so many miles away from what we just heard. So don't forget to add that vocoder to something like a cymbal swell or an organic sound to see how it changes that sound. If you want to get a full rundown on how to do that, then just check out my 3 moods episode. Now, the final thing that I wanted to show you in this episode was adding Shaperbox 3. You can achieve this in a plethora of different ways, and I'll let your imagination run wild. But what I wanted to be able to do was just have a little bit of noise injected into this mix anytime that there was a free space amongst the percussion. So hopefully you can hear that there. If I turn this envelope off, this is actually what's going on. So this is the outside bar preset from Shaperbox 3's noise generator. What I'm doing is turning the envelope on and setting firstly my depth to ×8, bring my amount and my threshold all the way down to the max. I'm setting my mode at duck and my release at about 3 seconds. This means that 3 seconds after any noise of percussion has passed, the outside bar preset noise is able to seep through the mix. I'm also high passing these sounds a little bit. It's a really subtle technique, and I have this almost at ground level between sort of -13, -17, something like that. It can add a lot of dynamic to your track that I think the pros are also using. Let's have a recap of that. I hope you enjoyed this episode, guys. It's something that I'm super passionate about. And thanks again to Soiree for letting us use his gorgeous stems in this episode. I can't wait to hear the finalized track. Thanks again for stopping by, guys. Let me know what you want to see in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.